Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
And we're back. Thanks for joining us once again. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires BeliefCast. I'm so grateful for all of your, dedication to this show. I cannot believe how much we've grown, and it's because of you guys, the listeners. Thank you for tuning in week after week. I also like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Siegfried and Jensen, Wasatch Recovery, Veracity Networks, and iHill Institute. You guys are fantastic. You guys do amazing at what you do, and I'm just grateful that you believe enough in me to sponsor this, and it really allows us to get this message out to so many people, and I'm just grateful for that. And I've had such amazing guests on, and today, and not only do I have an amazing person, we've known each other for quite some time now, and I actually consider him a friend, and it's Thomas McConkie. Thomas, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Todd. Happy to be here.
Man, he you're going to love him because not only does he have a great story, but he's so well-spoken, and he's got, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard this, but you got the best voice.
Really?
Yeah. It's like the
radio voice.
It's like the radio. it's more like a yoga Buddhist voice.
Well, I am a meditation teacher for a living, so I guess I went into the right profession.
Yes, you did. And your voice does that. But, you are, you're the author of Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis. You love writing. You said you've got 2 other books that are in manuscript, just haven't published them yet, but you're going to probably do that soon, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right.
Hopefully. You've been a mindfulness teacher for over 20 years.
I've been practicing almost 25.
Is it coming up to 25?
Yeah, so yeah.
Wow.
I love it. Yeah.
And you're really amazing at it, by the way.
Thank you.
You're a researcher and a teacher in the field of adult development.
Mm-hmm.
You're the creator of Lower Lights, which I want to talk a lot about because that's such a cool thing.
Be fun. Thanks.
You have a powerful online course called Transformations of Faith.
Oh, you knew about that.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, look at you.
Oh, heck yes.
You've done your research.
Hey, absolutely. You had a really cool experience of a faith healing thing that happened when you were 12 years old. I want to touch on that really kind of opened your eyes to a lot of things, even as a 12-year-old, which actually plays a part in what you're doing now, even, I think. You live a very simplistic life. We just talked about, you're married, you just have a brand new child. Well, 13 months.
Yeah,
his name's Phoenix.
Yeah.
So
right.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
But again, honestly, the reason why I reached out to you, Thomas, is I love the way you carry yourself. You feel very safe. I've heard people say that. Other mutual friends that we have will mention that about you. And I've met with you for some help as well. And I felt the exact same. I just felt safe with you. I think that's probably your best quality that I'm aware of. I'm sure you got many more. But I just love the way you carry yourself and the way you treat people. And I think people need to hear your message today.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Todd, because since I met you and learned about your work, I've been so impressed with who you are. And sitting with you right now, I feel the same way I did the day I met you. Like my heart is just touched. You have such a tenderness about you that opens my heart up. And I just value the friendship, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we just start? You're doing a lot of amazing things right now, which we'll get to, but I want people to get to know you a little better.
Sure. Ask me a question. It's like we're on our second date in front of an audience, and it somehow doesn't feel awkward. I'm relaxed. Let's do it. What would you like to know about me?
Well, let's start with, where did you grow up, and tell us about your family life and a little bit about your childhood.
Well, my dad was in law school in Seattle when I was born. So I grew up on the Puget Sound, and
it's beautiful.
My parents tell me one of my favorite things to do when I was a toddler was to ride that ferry across the Puget Sound.
I bet.
So the waters of the Puget Sound got into my bones, my marrow. But after my dad graduated from law school, we came to Salt Lake City, where a lot of our family is. And I was in Salt Lake in my formative years, from about age 3 to 19.
Okay.
This is where, my soul was forged.
The soul was forged.
Yeah,
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I left for many years and
Yeah.
then came back after many years. And I've my most recent stint here, it's 10 years and counting.
Wow.
So
That's
we
cool.
can fill in some details, but yeah.
Well, one thing I want to just hit me is you're very calm. You have this and maybe
talk to my wife.
Talk to your wife. She might tell me a different story. But you have a calmness about you. I think it's part of what we said earlier about this safe feeling that people have around you.
Yeah.
Have you always been were you like that as a kid? Were you pretty kind of even kill, or did this kind of mature over time? I mean,
if I had to guess, in some ways you have to ask a parent or an older sibling about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think whatever calm you're picking up on is probably more cultivated than like born with.
Okay.
I think if you looked at me as like a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 12-year-old, I was a little more, I think rambunctious was a word I learned from a young age. Like my mom keeps calling me rambunctious. What's that? So I think rambunctious was my energetic style.
Yeah.
But I was really like changed by meditation. I got into meditation when I was 18 years old, which is some time ago now. And that opened up different dimensions of my life. And so maybe like my baseline state when I sit down on a comfortable couch with a friend, they say like, man, you seem really calm. But I can get rambunctious.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we got to get your wife on here
Totally.
to really answer that question.
Totally.
Well, you have this energy about you that again, like you said, when we first met, even I could feel this from you, and it's no different today. It's like we never left that meeting that we met in, and
totally.
So it's been wonderful. So what were some of the things you did as a child? What were you into, and what were things that you maybe a hobby or something that you fell in love with?
My dad, he called me a Renaissance man when I was like in 6th grade, which that just came to mind, but it was, which was, really a compliment coming from my father. But I loved art. I was really a prolific artist. I loved to play chess. I loved music. I was a trumpet player in elementary school. I was kind of a man of the arts when I was younger, and I loved all that. I also loved athletics. I did all. Grew up in Utah, so it was mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, rock climbing, and all the local fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, did you have siblings?
Yeah, I grew up with 6 siblings.
6 siblings. Talk about that, and how was that? Where did you fall in the pecking order?
I'm second, second oldest,
Okay.
and what to talk about? I think in some ways I'm a stereotypical second child. Like the oldest child is so talented and successful and obedient. How can I possibly compete with that? I'm going to just break off and do my own thing. I think, you read the psychology, I think the second kid tends to do that.
Yeah.
That was me. So growing up with siblings, I think I kind of came into a really stormy period in my adolescence. So I fell away from my close relationships with the siblings, and was kind of stormy and lowering and, looking to start something on my own. That comes to mind when you ask about growing up with a lot of siblings. But if I go back even before, funny, why did I just go to my adolescence directly? That's where the darkness is. But if I go back before that, I mean, it's, like I have brothers like a couple years older or younger, and we're like a pack of wolves, and we hardly ever came home. Like it's like those were back in the days in like kind of suburban Utah, where we would just go out the front door in the morning and we'd play games all day with the kids in the neighborhood, like free range children, and come back for dinner. That's how I grew up. And now my wife talk about it enviously, like, can we even trust our kid with the people next door for 30 minutes? We should, like, it's the mentality is completely changed.
It's amazing. Like I saw this picture, I don't know, it might've been on like Facebook or something, and where it showed a picture back in the day where you knew where all the kids were at because all their bikes were piled on the lawn in the front, right?
I totally remember that.
They're all just like 7 bikes. Well, everyone's at this house, right? Whereas you don't see that anymore. And it's just different, you know? It just really is a lot different, which is, I guess it can be good or bad either way, but it's interesting how times have changed.
So I was born 1980, and I grew up in the 80s, and that's how we grew up in the 80s. Is your parents never knew where you were, but you were probably safe.
Probably safe. Exactly. Wow. Well, so I mentioned in the introduction, that when you were 12 years old, I mean, you grew up in a religious family, obviously.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of your life. I mean,
Still is.
Still is.
Yeah,
No, I know
in
that.
beautiful ways. Yeah.
In a lot of beautiful ways. We'll talk about that.
Sure.
Don't want to pretend
I wasn't
not.
correcting you.
Okay.
I was just being emphatic. Like, yeah, totally. Religion. That's
Still
like
is,
the
Todd.
family business.
Yeah, exactly. The family business for sure. Well, you had something going on at 12 and you experienced something pretty cool.
Yeah.
Will you just explain that story to our listeners for us?
Yeah, you're talking about the faith healing.
The faith healing. And I thought,
still
man, that
think
was really
about
cool.
this. Isn't it wild? I mean, our lives are comprised of innumerable moments, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
infinite moments. And yet there was a moment when I was 12 years old. I reflect on it, not daily, but probably weekly.
Wow.
Changed me. It's just like in the substance of who I am.
Yeah.
I got really sick. It was back we had big winters when I was a kid, so it's like imagine
Yeah.
the snow piling up like 6 feet high. Let's exaggerate a little bit. It's just so snowy and
Yeah.
dark and wet. And I had this terrible flu. When you grow up with that many siblings in the house,
It
you
just
get some
passes.
crazy viruses
For
whipping
sure.
through there. I was super sick and just just pale and trembling and feverish. And I just had never been so sick in my life.
Yeah.
And my grandparents lived down the street. They were close by. And my mom's just like, oh, Tommy, can we have my dad up to give you a blessing? She's just so tender. My mom is such a tender being. And actually, your heart reminds me of hers. Like when I'm around you, I just feel this tenderness. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you.
So I just feel right at home. But she just was so tender. Said like, can we have my dad up? She said he has the power to heal. And to this day, like that's so meaningful.
Yeah.
To say that about somebody, because there are people, you're
sure.
one of them. I mean, I know you to be
thanks.
a healer yourself, and it's such a spiritual gift.
Oh, thank you.
And I didn't even hesitate when I was, when my mom said that. I'm just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
be healed. Why not?
I'm in.
What?
Yeah.
How could I say anything but yes to that?
Yeah.
He came up, and I've written about this in like very like meticulous detail, which would probably be bad radio if I tried to give you all the details, but I'll give you like the sense of it was.
Yeah, please.
My granddad shows up. He's a super ordinary guy. He shows up in his like overcoat and his scally cap. He's, old at this point. I can't remember how old at the time. He was old,
Yeah.
well into his 70s.
Sure.
Kind of hunched over. He was about 5'10", taller in his prime. He's a Swiss German guy, bumpy nose.
Yeah.
He's just a venerable man. The family loved him, respected him for his like just simple spirit.
Yeah.
He just had a quality of love about him. Anyway, that's as much as I'll say about the healer. And
Yeah, that's good.
at any rate, he just sat me down on a chair, as is our tradition. He had some consecrated oil and just put it on my head and said a blessing. And what I remember so distinctly about that experience was it was like my body was on fire during the blessing.
Wow.
And I was too young. I didn't have like a belief system around this stuff. That's what's kind of beautiful about our childhood.
For sure.
We're just these kind of like naked, naive, physical beings. Like the way the world happens to us, it's like a wave hitting you. It's just sensation. You just feel it and you're alive.
Yeah.
This blessing just splashed over me and drenched me, and my body was on fire. But it was a flame that didn't consume. It was this purifying flame.
Wow.
And it was like my first memory of being holy.
Wow.
And, I'm a jaded adult now with lots of wounds and neuroses and hang-ups. I'm kidding. I'm kind of kidding. I'm an
know what you're
adult now.
saying,
We
though.
lose touch with
We
that.
do.
Yet, I think I reflect on this experience so much because I know in my heart, like, when I knew myself to be holy in that moment, I am still that.
Yeah.
And I will never not be what I felt myself to be in that moment. And neither will you, for that matter, or anybody. Like,
sure.
I learned in that moment how holy just the nature of all creation is. And over time, as I grew older, it's okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
No.
Just getting emotional here a little bit.
It's lovely, yeah.
The way you said that, I wasn't expecting that, actually.
What weren't you expecting?
I don't know. But when you said, like, I realized that I was holy, I just reminded me when we were kids, we had it figured out.
That's right.
And I think when we get older, like you said, we struggle. And I think that's what hit me, is that, man, we had it figured out when we were younger.
That's right.
You know,
that's
it's like I always say to my clients, let's get back to not being childish, but childlike.
Yep.
You know, so thank you for sharing what you said. That just really hit me hard. And I apologize
for
it's getting emotional.
No, let's tell the story together. I mean, that's what it is. So over time, as that experience ripened in me, I saw it everywhere. I saw the holiness of humanity. I saw the holiness of the plants and the animals and the rocks and the mountains and the lakes. And I think my adulthood is all about holding an intention to preserve that insight. If I do nothing but just like hold that gem close to me, I trust that like a good life will come from that.
You mentioned you think about this almost weekly.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened when you were 12.
Totally.
But I think that's what you're saying. You're trying to preserve that and remind yourself, man, that's me. Yeah. That's who I am.
That's right.
I'm holy. I was good, you know, and you felt that, like you said, that fire that wasn't consuming but purifying.
Yeah.
I love how you said that.
Thank you.
That gave me chills.
Thank you. This is what's coming to mind. I mean, we recently celebrated Independence Day in the United States. And, there's a hymn called the Battle Hymn of the Republic that has been sung since the Civil War, actually, in the United States. And there's a line in that hymn that I'm reminded of right now. I think it goes, "In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me."
Ooh.
That glory, Christians call it Christ. And I know, you know, from living around the world, and other people know this as well, that other people have other names for it. But that glory in Christ's bosom that we speak to, that's the same glory in our bosom.
Yeah.
And, you know, my sense as a Christian, we can talk about my Buddhism later on, but my sense as a Christian.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Is that there's a glory in our bosom, and there's a light and a fire that transfigures us, and it's real. And I feel so much of our lives is about coming into relationship with this transfiguring light and remembering what we've always been.
Yeah.
And then I think what's key is expressing what we've always been in the world and sharing that with others.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Yeah. So thanks for giving me the chance to relive it. It changes every time, and it deepens, and I feel it in your heart.
Well, it's amazing what it does to the room, like what I'm feeling right now, right?
Right.
Because again, it's a reminder that you're speaking truth here, and we're both feeling it.
Right.
And this room's lit up.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, listeners. I mean,
totally.
it's just lit up.
Totally.
So thanks.
It's remarkable, and if I may,
please,
as I'm just like in the moment with you, and it does feel just so beautiful right now. I just feel my heart open and alive and connected to you and everybody. When the Prince Siddhartha like woke up, you know, this is getting into Buddhist history here. The prince sat under a tree. He said, "I'm not moving until I figure out this whole suffering thing. Like there's too much suffering in humanity. There's got to be a better way." And he breaks through. You know, the accounts in the tradition are amazing, but the prince, the future Buddha, he breaks through and he stands up and he says something to the effect of, "Oh, wonder of wonders, truly all beings have this nature."
Ooh.
Right? And that's what it feels like. Whatever language we speak, whatever tradition we're from, there's this sense of like, how does it feel this good in the room right now? How could my heart possibly be so full of love right now? How's it? Oh, wonder of wonders. Yeah. So that's become, you know, my livelihood, my work in the world. I look for creative ways to help people experience this, deepen in it, anchor in it, and share it with others in their own unique way.
Yeah. Love it.
End of show. That's it. That's all I have to say, Tom.
Okay, we're done. Thanks for joining us. No, I want to keep on this because, you know, that's one of my questions that I have for you is I wanted to ask you, why do we suffer so much?
Yeah.
Why do people suffer? And I want to get to that. But I think I want to point out, and maybe for our listeners too, sharing that story is a vulnerable thing for you to do. That's you putting your heart out a little bit here. Hey, here's something that's really personal to me.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's amazing how powerful vulnerability is. Mm-hmm. And I just was feeling like you're being so vulnerable. I know you know me, but and then we got over 100,000 listeners listen to this, but I just always am blown away how vulnerability can bring a room together.
Yeah.
It can connect us. And I felt that when you were just being vulnerable.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's remarkable how that works. I don't know how that works, but I know that works too.
And oh, wonder of wonders, right?
Right.
And I think part of that story when Buddha became Buddha, right? He was like, why is everyone suffering so much? Why is everyone struggling?
Right.
What's going on here?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I want to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right?
No, he was like the world's first addiction counselor.
Yes, he was. I mean, yeah, if you look at it that way, he really was.
Yeah.
And I love the Buddhist philosophy and the teachings. And I've got a book right here, True Love by, I'm not going to say it wrong. Thich Nhat Hanh. And have you read that? I'm sure.
I haven't read that one.
Oh, I'm going to give you one.
Oh,
I'm going to give it to
I'll
you.
accept.
It is amazing. I had a client of mine. This is hopefully, so I'll go a little quick tangent. I brought him to a meeting here. He was struggling with addiction, and he wanted to come to a meeting, like an AA meeting. And I brought him here to Wasatch. That's how I discovered Wasatch, where I'm at right now. Oh. And I gave him As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I go, you need to read this because that book changed my life. Yeah. And he goes, well, I'll read that if you'll read this. And he handed me True Love. And I went, okay. Yeah. And I read that book and I was blown away. I was like, no way. This is so cool.
Oh, I can't wait.
So it'll just speak your language.
Prize.
So going back, I know there's so much I want to talk to you about, and man, that was a beautiful thing. As you grew up, as you said, you probably got rambunctious, and you're a thinker, you're a writer, you really, I think on a deep level, you took a different path. Talk about that a little bit and kind of where you're at with that.
Different path than the church, you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
And for those who maybe aren't of the LDS faith, I mean, that's how you were raised. That's how you grew up. It's ingrained in your family.
For sure, yeah.
You've got, family in the past that's obviously been high up in the church and things like that. So it's been part of your life.
Sure.
But you decided to take, or you had some things happen that took you down a different road.
Yeah, it was.
If you don't mind sharing that.
Of course not. No, it was intuitive. I was raised in the Latter-day Saint tradition of the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And it was just what you did where I grew up. I think in my, suburban Holiday, Utah, it was close to 100% Mormon. I mean, as close as you can kind of
Close you can get, yeah.
Yeah. And somehow at age 13 or so, totally unexpectedly, I mean, it had never occurred to me that there was anything outside of our way of life, because you don't think that way when you're a kid. Yeah. And yet something in me stirred and said, this whole church program, this whole way we're being, it's not working. Yeah. And even thinking that way, there's such dissonance. It's like, well, where else are you going to go? If you're a fish, you swim in water. That's the option. And it's like I was this fish in water saying like, any other options? Right. Kind of tired of the water. Yeah. So it was disorienting. It was confusing. It was traumatic. It was weird. Sure. All these things. But I was determined. Like there was something, to this day, I don't know exactly what it was. It wasn't one thing, but it was just this something in me that said, there's another way for you to be. Yeah. That led to a whole lot of like misbehaving as an adolescent, like adolescents do when they're angry and feel kind of orphaned by their family and their community and their church. So, I got through high school, you could say abusing substances and playing a lot of water polo and swimming. So I was like the stoned jock. That was the archetype. I had to sum it up in two words. I was the stoned jock.
Okay.
I even remember one time when I was stoned and someone laughed. They're like, I've never seen such a muscly kid stoned on pot. I'm like, I don't know how to take that, but that's kind of where that's kind of where I was.
I guess that's a compliment.
Can I say that on your podcast?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So, anyways, but it was pain. I joke about it, but it was really painful. I mean, I didn't like altering my state with substances as a teenager. I actually didn't like it, and yet I felt so much pain inside. I felt so unwholesome, and I actually felt so much shame about myself that I didn't realize I felt. Yeah, I didn't know how to get away from it. I just didn't know what else to do. And that was years. I mean, that went on for a good 5 years, age 13 through the end of high school. I was just kind of like reaching for anything I could do to cope.
Well,
high school was coping.
And you were suffering.
Totally.
I mean, when you talk about dissonance,
yeah,
and I think, for our listeners who may not understand what that exactly means, explain that. What's you hear the term cognitive dissonance.
Sure.
Can you explain that just so who maybe doesn't understand it fully?
Well, like dissonance, I mean, it's like an acoustic or musical metaphor. When you have these different frequencies that don't harmonize, they clash. So it creates this kind of cacophony and uncomfortable feeling in the body. Like by dissonance, I mean, man, like I had a faith healing, and I have this deep sense that the divine is real, God is real, love is real. So it's not like I was against spirituality.
Right.
And yet, like the church, which, like, from my perspective, does spirituality so beautifully in so many ways. How is it that doesn't work for me anymore? That should work. Like, that was the dissonance. Like, why am I not better adjusted and happier than I actually feel?
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what I mean by dissonance. Okay. It's like I had nowhere to stand.
Yeah. Very well explained. I just want, I think sometimes our listeners might be like, what does he mean by dissonance?
That's good.
But it's also a form of suffering.
For sure.
For sure. And that's why you were acting out. You were getting stoned. You were doing all this stuff.
I started drinking, hard alcohol when I was 13.
Yeah.
13-year-old's liver, growing brain doesn't need like
that.
Vodka, gin in the diet. It just doesn't. But I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
18 years old. So, those 5 years were, we could spend a lot of time that we don't need to spend on that. But it was rough. And I was like really like worn to the bone, honestly.
Yeah.
By the time I got out of high school, barely, by the way. I mean, I just barely graduated by the skin of my teeth. And at that point, I moved out of my parents' house, decided to go away to school. And like, I realized my freshman year, like, I do not have the life skills. I don't have the emotional, psychological wherewithal to take care of myself. It's like, oh, mom and dad aren't here, and I have no idea how to live a life. And, enter the Buddhists. There was a Zen center, like an order of Zen Buddhism, a couple blocks away from my college apartment. And I just start meditating with them. And there was something about that, just entering into stillness and silence as a daily ritual. Just like, no matter what was going on mentally, emotionally, or like, in terms of activity in the world, like a heartbeat every day with the steadiness of, I'm just going to sit still. Even if the tempest rages for 30 minutes straight and it's miserable, I'm going to sit my butt down and I'm just going to be still. And I had this intuition really early on as I was starting my Buddhist practice that even when the mind is frenetic and even when emotions are boiling and convulsing, there is this underlying stillness that I wouldn't have expected. I thought stillness goes away when things get crazy, but actually stillness is always here right now for us.
Wow.
That was totally revelatory. And almost 25 years later, right now in this moment, it's still revelatory because we can together right now, and the listeners, we can just sense into this underlying stillness right now.
Yeah. Wow.
And every time we do, if we do that, take a moment.
Yeah. I
this
love it.
Stillness is so rejuvenating and restoring. It's like water to the soul. And so I've just come back here daily. And now it's gone more from like, oh, I meditate in the morning to like every moment I remember, it's like, oh yeah.
Center yourself.
Oh yeah. And then I look at Todd's eyes and I feel his heart, like, oh, his heart's calling me home. Oh, yeah. And so it just becomes this rhythm of life. It's just, being, and it changed me. And so the reason I bring that up is that like it completely eliminated my need for substance abuse.
Wow.
It just went away. And I know addiction is complex and it plays out differently in different people's lives. Sure. I'm not saying like, hey, everyone should go meditate and that'll solve it. But what I'm illustrating is like for all of us addicts, whatever we're addicted to, if we can find that refuge and that solace in the depths of our soul, it initiates a healing experience that cannot be stopped once it starts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautifully said. Man, it reminds me of a quote by Gunelia Norris that says, within each of us there is a silence as vast as the universe. Yeah. And when we experience that silence, we remember who we are. Yeah. And
thank you.
And that's what as you're saying this, I'm going, wow.
Yeah.
And I do believe that, I mean, I've had people say the same thing, you know, I was, because tell me what you think of this. I'm just curious, because I'll tell people, and I get a lot of flack for this in the recovery world, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I think, like when I'm dealing with my clients, I'll say, you don't have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. You have a thinking problem.
Sure.
It's your thoughts that's causing all this suffering.
Yeah.
And so when I hear when you said you finally found, you went to that Zen place, you know,
kind of slipped into
and you
that
just
envelope.
slipped into it. It was like, whoa, what is this? And it was, you allowed your body to stop and your mind to stop suffering.
Yes.
You stopped the suffering,
right.
Even if it was just for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You at least stopped it.
That's right.
But what you really are doing too, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert, but you slowed your mind or your thoughts down.
Yeah.
To where you could I'm just listening to the heartbeat.
Yeah.
Just feeling that. And in that moment you realize I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay. That is universal. I've taught many students over the years this kind of art of meditation.
Love it.
And I've found that it's universally true when people really touch into this still point, I could say. They universally report that, like, oh, there's an okayness about everything.
Yeah.
Even when it's all falling apart, even when like life is throwing up major challenges and I feel grief and I feel loss and I feel heartbreak, I feel fear, we're still human. Yeah. And yet it's an okayness that supports that sense of, well, it's okay to be this afraid. Yeah. It's okay to feel this much grief. It's okay to just feel everything I'm feeling because I'm okay. Yeah. And it gives us this confidence to just embody ourselves, inhabit ourselves, and like, I'm going to live a full spectrum human life. That's what we're here for.
Love it. Yeah. So you have this experience and you're starting to feel great. You stop, poisoning yourself with drugs and alcohol and all that. Yeah. And so is that when you're like, okay, I want to not only do this, but I want to learn about this and I want to teach this. So talk about how this kind of led into doing what you do today even.
It came later,
Okay.
To be specific, I had been really deep into my Buddhist lifestyle, you could say, my Buddhist practice, my meditation, sutra study, which scriptures is the, sutra is the term in the Buddhist tradition. Okay. So I was into it, and it just was giving me so much. And it was 13 years in that I had this. So I'd been like 13 years. It was a while, and I was like at it with a kind of religious devotion. And then something very subtle just kind of changed all at once. And for the first time I thought like, hey, I've got a responsibility here. It went from like, I guess, healing and self-care, self-discovery to this maybe a kind of overflowingness. Like, I'm good. I'm just good. I still have my stuff to figure out, but I'm fine. It's okay that I still have stuff to figure out. Right. And like, I'm looking out at the world, and man, if people even got like a little taste of what I've been given by my teachers, mentors, by the traditions, by the grace that pervades all of creation, if they had a little bit of this, it could do a lot for them too. So it just shifted my focus. It was about the time, it wasn't too long after that I met you. But this happened around 2011, but a little over 10 years ago, the shift where, I'm just going to like put my heart out there and tell people this means a lot to me. And if it means something to them, I'll walk with you a little bit.
Yeah. And what a journey the last 10 years have been, right?
It's been amazing. It's been best 10 years of my life.
The stuff you've been doing has been fantastic. And totally. You're seriously one of these guys I admire so much. Talk about the last 10 years. Just, granted, there's a lot that's happened. Yeah. But what are you doing? Talk about, Lower Lights and your online course and just, what you're trying to do with helping people. What is your goal with this? And just kind of explain to our listeners what this is all about.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for that invite to talk about it. I'll talk about it in a way where it's personal to me, but I also want to make an effort to translate it for people listening, because I don't look at my work as like, oh, this is what I do, and it's important that I do this. I believe that we're all doing this in a certain way.
Okay.
And if we do it consciously, we get to enjoy it a lot more.
Right.
And we really experience just the benefits of loving and being loved very deeply.
Yeah.
So what I want to say for me personally and locally in this, like little geography where I'm from, I came home for a wedding 10 years ago, and I'd been gone a long time. I'd been living in Europe and China and all over the world. Yeah, I've been doing all that thing. And I come back, and it's like the vibe of the wedding party and the vibe of the neighborhood and the town, that felt sense you get when you walk in a room, when you walk in a neighborhood. I felt it, and I'm like, this is familiar. Like, I haven't felt like this in a long time. What is that? And it was, Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body.
Oh yeah.
I felt, it's like, I feel suffering right now, but it doesn't feel like my personal unique suffering. It just feels like humanity. It's like, what is that? It's the first time I'd felt it,
really
not lost in my own suffering. I was free enough to experience it as like, what's going on? It's in the air here. And I kept asking into it, and it was something, if I were to put words to it, it was something like that drama, that pull I had felt as a 13-year-old away from the tradition, that fish who no longer wanted to swim in water.
Right.
It's like that was happening collectively. It's like the tradition that brought us up around here, it's evolving and trying to evolve, or the people in the tradition are evolving faster than the institution can keep pace with them.
Yeah.
It gets complex. I don't need to say too much about it, but the language people use around here is something like identity crisis, faith crisis, God crisis. They use the term crisis a lot, and it's pointing to, I'm not who I thought I was.
Yeah.
Life is not, it doesn't mean what I thought it meant. Even like what I thought was God seems different, and I just feel disoriented. I feel lost. I feel scared. I feel angry. So all these emotions were just like erupting to the surface. Wow. And I came back for a wedding. I thought, I know this pain. It's like my own body, but like magnified by a million. It's like, out spreading through the valley and the mountains now. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to just like go to the very heart of this. I'm going to just stay put, and I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to become a student of the pain. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to sit with people. I'm going to sit with people in that tenderness and see what I can learn. Wow. And that's really what started the 10 years. Okay. That's what initiated the whole Lower Lights project.
I never knew that. That's That's fascinating. Well, I think that's what makes you why people love you so much. And I know you don't like the adoration, but it's like you feel deeply. You really do. Your heart is so open, and that doesn't surprise me that you felt that on that level. And granted, you went through a bunch of things to get you to that point to feel that, but that doesn't surprise me from what I know of you.
I feel that feels like a compliment coming from you.
It absolutely is. I look at that as that you feel on a great level. You feel people's pain. You feel their joy. You feel on a level that a lot of people maybe don't get to, and that's why being fully open right now is I reached out to you because I was struggling, and I came and met with you a few times, and that's what I felt from you. So it was awesome. That's meaningful. So that opened up this door. Lower Lights. Talk about Lower Lights and why is the title Lower Lights, or the name? Lower Lights is one of my favorite images or metaphors that comes from the Christian tradition. It's from a Protestant hymn. I love hymns. I love music. And there's a hymn. It was originally called "Let the Lower Lights Be Burning." It goes by a different name now in our faith tradition, but let the lower lights be burning. And the idea, I'll give an abbreviated story because I could make a whole, invite me back, we'll make a whole podcast episode out of this. All right, we'll do it. But essentially, let the lower lights be burning. There was this captain of a ship, and they were trying to come in to dock on a very stormy night. And what happens is, like, pre-GPS, pre-modern instrumentation and navigation instruments, they had the upper lights, which is the sun, the moon, and the stars. Those are the upper lights. The lower lights are the lights along the shore. It's the lighthouse. It's the inhabitants of the village who, like,
put on a lamp so that the mariners coming in can actually see, oh, we got about 200 meters before we hit that rocky shoal, right? Yeah. And if the lower lights aren't burning, all is lost. Wow. God, universal love, intelligence, spirit, whatever we call it, can do all its work. All of the bodies of heaven are shining. But if we on the ground don't light our lamp, we're completely lost. Wow. So to me, the metaphor of lower lights is like we have an opportunity as human beings to be vessels of this divine light. The upper lights are the lower lights. It's all just light. And we can live in a way where we're in alignment with this light. Excuse me. No worries. Todd's so emotional, right? He's choked up because I'm just on a roll.
This is good stuff.
But that's what it is, the lower lights. So to me, it's this real invitation and even a challenge to rise up to. Like, if we really let the lower lights be burning, if we're a light unto ourselves and others, what kind of world can we create together?
Thank you for sharing that. Very well said, and it makes a lot of sense in how important that is. Mm-hmm. So I knew there was a cool story behind why you named it that. So tell us what that's all about, and what do you do, and why would people come to you? Why would they want to sign up or learn more about you and all that stuff? What do you guys do there?
Well, I don't know if people want to learn about me so much as like there's like a dance we do. There's a way we are together at Lower Lights that I hope is supportive to the people who show up. There are a lot of different ways to talk about the work we do. I think it's helpful to take a bit of the big picture into like take account of the big picture when we look at like what we're doing at Lower Lights. If we go way back, we look at the formation of the great world religions, the great wisdom traditions. Once they're set in motion, like the Muhammads and the Buddhas and the Jesuses, and they just unleash this force on the world. Right. Then these traditions evolve. They change over time. If you study the traditions, they evolve dramatically over time. Yeah. I think the effects of that change and evolution have never been more felt than in the 21st century. In other words, like we're in an information age where there's rich exchange between all the traditions and worldviews and ways of life. Yeah. And that puts, I think, a healthy developmental pressure on the traditions. Like, hey, these guys are doing it this way. What if we did it this way? We've been doing it this way for 2,000 years. Yeah. What if we did a little more of that in our lane? Right? So it's stimulating all of this change in the traditions. And because the institutions are changing, I think, at a rate more rapid than they ever have, people within the traditions are going to feel jostled. Yeah. And they're going to feel like, is this home for me? Or is there a better place for me? And when I say traditions, I deeply honor the, secular traditions of the modern era.
Sure.
The traditions of atheism, agnosticism are manifold, and there are people that I know of and work with who have deep faith within that context. So it's not, when I talk about traditions, it's not just, that person believes in God, that person believes in Dharma, that person believes in Vishnu. It's more than that. It's that as human beings, we strive to make meaning of our lives. Yeah. And we ask ourselves, what would be a meaningful way for me to spend the only life that I've got here? And it turns out that is a disruptive question to be asking these days, because the answers that seem so pat and so sure, even a few years ago, now people are like, I'm not so sure. Like, I've got new questions that I didn't even know I had. And that creates suffering, disorientation, fear. Yeah. And Lower Lights is this space where we hold the questions really deeply, and we try to really honor as broad a spectrum of human experience as we can, and just walk together.
I love that.
So whatever, let's see if any of that's usable in post, Todd. That's what I got for you today.
No, I love that. Yeah. So would it be considered like a mindfulness course when they come to you? Is that how you would phrase it? For our listeners.
That's a great question. My core skill set is in meditation. Yeah. So we do a lot of that. I think it's a really powerful tool to make use of.
For sure.
And I also work a lot with developmental psychology. Just a quick sidebar on developmental psychology here. For a long time, psychologists believed that there were, certain number of childhood stages of development.
Right.
And it's just been in the last 50 years or so that scientists, researchers, psychologists have discovered as many stages of adulthood as exist in childhood. So think about that for a moment.
Oh, wow.
You go through like 20 stages of child development, whatever, and then like you hit whatever voting age, 18, or you hit 25 and you're out of school and you have your first job and you're, whatever, all that stuff. And we think, oh, he's an adult, she's an adult, they're an adult. And actually what the field of developmental psychology says is like, this is just the very beginning of this new stage of life. So that set of tools helps us ask questions about like, what is your life asking you to become right now?
Wow.
And it turns out we never stop asking that question.
Yeah.
I like to say there's no terminus to adult development. There's no point at which it's like, oh, now I'm really an adult. I'm good.
Right.
It's like, hang it up.
Yeah, I don't need to learn anymore.
I'm good.
Life's over.
Yeah, like transformation is boundless and endless. And when we take that in, man, adulthood looks really different.
Wow. And I think it's a good thing, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because it reminds me of another quote, and I don't know if Benjamin Franklin actually really said this, because you know how like people
Quotes,
always get misquoted.
Internet.
Right, exactly. But I love the quote, though.
Yeah.
It says, some people die at 25, but aren't buried until they're 75.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens. We get to a certain point. Yep, I've hit adulthood.
Yeah.
I've capped out.
Yeah.
I can't learn much anymore. I'm kind of
Totally.
an old dog. I can't learn new tricks. And I live my life that way. And that becomes we just exist.
Right.
We're not truly living. So when we ask these tough questions, yeah, they might be uncomfortable, but man, it's really making us really live.
Totally.
I love that.
Who was it? There's a great teacher whom I really revere, and he says something to the extent of, we have to let go of our fantasy of comfortable transformation.
Ooh.
Right. And he's right.
Yeah.
If we're really, I think the soul does long to transform.
Yeah.
We long for that transfiguring light buried in the heart of the universe.
Yeah.
And yet we also know intuitively that light comes at a cost. It costs us what we know and what helps us feel secure. So it's this great dynamic of life of like, what I want most, which is to grow, is what I fear most, which is to grow. And how can I navigate that path other than by grace and love and a little help from my friends?
Well, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, a little help from my friends for sure. We all need that, right? That kind of ties into my next question, and I kind of prefaced it earlier. Like, there's so much suffering going on.
Yeah.
People suffer.
Yeah.
And I know that's, people say that's life, that's part of life. We're going to suffer. And I get that, and I look at my life right now, and I'll even say this to my clients. Most of the time, I'm pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Life's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have moments of suffering, sure.
Right.
But I also see, and maybe it's because of my profession too, I see so much suffering with people.
Right.
I wanted to get your perspective on that and why that is, do you think, and what your thoughts are about suffering.
It's a big one, Todd.
I know.
Well, let me talk about what it's not, or let me start with I'm steeped in the Buddhist tradition, and a refrain I hear a lot from Buddhists, which I think is well intended, but I want to challenge it a little bit.
Sure.
They talk about pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And there's a whole worldview around how we can learn to be in pain, but be accepting of it and have equanimity with it, be relaxed, etc. And I honestly feel like that's a bit glib. I don't know if I would say suffering's optional. I haven't ever met a human being that doesn't suffer profoundly.
Yeah.
So, maybe suffering is built into form.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then maybe I'll wax a little Christian here. What if suffering is potentially redemptive?
Yeah.
What if our suffering is actually an invitation of grace to transform? To me, that feels a little bit more closer to home than like acting as though every time I suffer, it's like, oh, I'm doing that to myself. I think there's truth to that. I think there's an important truth and tradition to that.
Yeah.
But I'm actually of the school of thought that so long as we're in form, suffering is real. But depending on the way in which we suffer, we can resent our suffering and we can rage against our suffering.
Yeah.
We can consecrate our suffering.
Wow.
We can kneel down to our suffering. There are different ways to be human.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, it's a big topic, but I would say, you know, what would I say? Being in the presence of suffering, I've learned more and more to recognize that there's a sacrament here, something holy that's descended for our partaking. How are we going to do it?
Wow. Well, that's I know that's a big question, and there's a lot there, and I love how you phrased all of that. What could you say to someone right now who's listening, who is suffering, and it feels like it's constant, and they're just maybe in a rut, and they just can't find their way out of it. They feel hopeless. Yeah. What would you tell that person right now that's listening to you?
I'll tell you what comes up, and you know, prayers that this is useful to who's listening. Earlier in the show, we talked about an underlying stillness. Like life can seem super chaotic on the surface, but in the depths, it's like, oh, there's this restorative stillness that's here. Suffering can very much seem bottomless and endless and meaningless and tormenting. And what I find in suffering is that, like, that's the surface level of suffering. In the depths of suffering, I find a universal love and compassion. I would call it a divine love. And to just orient towards suffering in that way has really changed my relationship to it. So I would just share, I don't know if I'm inviting people, but I'll share personally and hopefully vulnerably.
Yeah, please.
That when I just continue to like sound the depths of my own suffering, I'm amazed to always find new depths of love.
Yeah, wow, very well said. Because I know people listening to this, a lot of people tune into this show because they've struggled, right? Or they are struggling, or they have a son or a daughter and they're not sure. Right. What do I tell my son or daughter? I mean, what could a parent tell their child who has this dissonance? I mean, could anyone have said anything to you back then when you had this dissonance that would have changed your view of it, or did you just have to go through it?
You know, I think both, which is lovely. Like, no, nothing could have taken that away from me, I think. And actually, thank goodness nothing took that away from me. I truly hope every human being lives to see the point where they can look back at that and say, like, oh, wow, like, that's what that was. Yeah. That's what that was. When that contracted love of suffering relaxes, breathes, and expands into its full glory, we realize, like, oh, that was somehow God's universe's way of purifying me, redeeming me.
Yeah, so it was happening for you.
Totally.
Versus to you, like you were being it. But in the moment, you don't see that.
Right, you can't see it. So yes, I needed to go through it. And I remember, this is a granddad story again, but I remember in a time of particularly acute suffering, this guy just looking at me. And he just said something to the effect of, I know you're going to be fine. All he did was express loving confidence in me. And I was lucky, like, to have a family member express true loving confidence in me is a gift and a privilege beyond all privileges. Yeah. What I would say to people listening, maybe you don't have a family member in this moment with that kind of maturity and wisdom. Many of us don't at certain times. Yeah. But I would say that there is something beyond the family member. There's something even beyond the personal realm, where there's something transpersonal, there's something universal, there's something divine that's actually saying that to us right now in its own way. That, like, Todd, like, you got this. Like, I am holding you deeply. We got this.
Got this.
And if we can learn to tune into that, I feel like, often you see me kind of touching my sternum right
notice
here.
that,
Like it's not my brain that's thinking up here. It's not even my feeling body, which has its own intelligence, but like right here at the center of my heart, that's where I tune into that radio signal. Like, I love you. You got this.
Mm-hmm.
We got this.
Yeah.
That's a good radio program to tune into.
That's a good one.
We don't listen to it enough.
We really don't. And that's so true. And we can laugh, but it's true though. Yeah. Like, how you said when you were at that wedding and you felt this suffering, and it was like you could feel it from humanity in that moment. Like I have moments of that too. Like, and I mean, again, I'm not trying to just get on a soapbox and talk about social media and how bad it is or whatever. Sure. But when I'll be at a restaurant or at a store and you see everyone's looking down to their phone.
Yeah.
And they're just, they're just endlessly just looking through stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I'm like, man, this is a problem.
Yeah. And
I'm guilty of it too. So I'm not trying to say I'm above that and I haven't had those issues too, Yeah. But I've heard it once said, and I don't take credit for this. And I know I heard it from someone. I can't remember who said it, but he said, we used to look look up for inspiration. Now we're looking down.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's dystopian.
Yeah. Sorry to bring a downer to this, but I think that's, I just think being in tune like that is also a good thing though. Yeah. Because it's allowed you to do what you do so well, is helping people through this, like you said, what do they call it? A faith crisis, a God crisis, or just a personal crisis, whatever they want to call that. Yeah. But I think because of what you've been through, like we said, it happened for you. You're in a position now to be able to, hey, let's stop looking down. Yeah. Let's look up. And whatever that looks like for someone. Yeah. If it's the Christian faith, if it's a Buddhism, if it's something else, that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
But let's tap into that, and we don't do it enough, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hope that made sense.
No, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah.
Well, if someone wants to reach out to you and ask you a question, or get to know you better, or to come be part of your programs and your courses and things like that, how would they do that?
Website is the best way.
Okay.
It's ironic, right? We just talked to them about looking down for inspiration. Now we're sending them to their devices.
Yes.
Hopefully this is uplifting online literature.
There is good for that, for sure.
lowerlightswisdom.org. So lower as in lower the lights, lowerlightswisdom.org. Okay. And that's where that's a hub for all our services, events, programs, all that stuff.
Can someone reach out to you there, and if they did have a question and they want to know more about you and more about your story, would they be okay to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally. Might take a while to get to him.
Yeah.
We'll do our
He's a busy man.
We do our best to answer all emails. But
it took me a year and a half to get him on the show.
Yeah, right. Right.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. But, well, I mean, I could talk to you all day, honestly. You're amazing. The feeling in the room's amazing. And I just love again, the way you carry yourself. And you wouldn't be in this position had you not gone through that difficulties as you were growing up and, traveling the world, all these things that you were doing to just try to find your place. And man, I just love that you've found it and you're helping others find it. And I just think I love what you do.
Thank you, Todd. You make it really easy to share my heart. So
I hope so.
Credit goes to the host. Thank you.
Well, you don't have to say that, but thank you. Well, thanks for your time. And so folks, there you go. Thomas McConkie. He's amazing. Please reach out to him. Check out his website. Reach out to him. Ask him a question. Check out his courses. If you're struggling or suffering on any level, it doesn't have to be a faith crisis. It doesn't have to be, have to even deal with religion. If it's just you're just struggling, reach out to Tom.
Just the basic dilemma of being a human being.
Exactly.
Is what we're all struggling with.
And I think what's good is teaching. I think if we can learn to tap into that stillness and that silence. And so I'm going to challenge our listeners, please reach out to him and try this out and learn some techniques that you can do on your own to tap into that.
Yeah. Well, I'll plug quickly. This
Please.
is a free service. We
Please.
have a podcast at our nonprofit. It's a nonprofit organization, Lower Lights. And we have a podcast called Mindfulness Plus. So you can check out a
Nice.
lot of bite-sized,
Please.
downloadable
Yeah.
episodes on mindfulness with a plus sign with Thomas McConkie. So that's on the website, and you can find that also where you get your podcast. That's a good
Sorry,
way
I
to
was
bring a
gonna
little
mention
more,
that. Yeah, that's
bring a little more
beautiful.
stillness in your life.
Absolutely. Please do that. And thanks for bringing that up. And
Yeah.
but yeah, again, thank you for your time. You're amazing. I'm grateful to call you a friend. And
Yeah, likewise.
this has been fun.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
You bet. Love you guys. Until next time.